Hey everybody, I received a decent amount of feedback when I did my general AOM tips and tricks guide that it would be really helpful to have a guide that focuses more in on hotkeys specifically. So that's what we're looking at doing today. We're going to go through all of the settings, hotkeys, really the whole gambit of exactly what makes sense for you to set up ahead of time before jumping into ranked play. Basically, I read through every single hotkey inside of the settings, every single setting for the most part. I didn't go through all the shared or specific Norse, Greek, Egyptian, Atlantean specific hotkeys. I think I'll leave that to individual players to decide what they want. But I did want to just give a general hotkey settings guide so that people can reference this and set up their own hotkeys, because there's really a lot here that I've customized for my own setup that I think is incredibly helpful. So I think this will be a quick video. I've got everything typed out ahead of time for when I go through, but you never know with my videos. I can go for a while. So let's just start from the beginning. On the graphics side of things, I don't think there's much to talk about here. It really just depends on what your computer has available. I've basically got everything all the way up on the highest settings possible, but this just depends on your specific computer, what you want to have for your graphics settings. The only things in here that I would say is just having display mode to borderless and not having a windowed mode. That would just seem annoying, but I'll leave that to everyone to decide what they want to have. In the game tab, there's a couple things that I want to call out that people may want to set up. The first thing is our pan, our screen edge panning. And this is what's actually going to affect us if we get in game. And how about I just go ahead and get in game so we can show how some of these work. But this is what's going to determine while in game how quickly your screen is going to pan left and right, up and down if you move your mouse. You can see I've got it quite fast. I like it being quite fast because this is the only way that I typically pan my screen. I'm not typically clicking on the mini maps, so that's why I have it set up that way. But just play around with the settings there, see what you like. And let's look at the other settings. Other things in here, there is this setting for camera shake. I have this off, particularly if I'm playing 1v1 in ranked pools, but I will say there is something really fun about this. If you're just doing casual team games or versus the AI, it is really fun to have Earthquake or other god powers do extra, visual damage to you because of the camera shake. But if you're looking for just strictly competitive optimization, I would recommend turning that off. Other things to call out, we have these two gameplay settings: immediately autoqueue villagers at the start of the game, and immediately autoqueue villagers in newly built town centers. You can see I have the first on and the second off. This is because in team games in particular, I play a lot of Norse, I find myself picking up a lot of town centers, and I find myself making a lot of idle villagers, and sometimes by the third or fourth TC, I don't really want to be producing villagers at those specific town centers. I've only capitalized on them to have the additional population space. The only other thing that I think is worthwhile calling out inside of this section is our easy military drag select. And basically what this is going to do is if we have military units and villager units, and I highlight everything, it's only going to select the military units. I set this up before we had attack move available for our gatherers, but I do think this is really helpful, particularly in a battle. You can just highlight your whole army, even if there's villagers in the area, and you'll be able to select that army. So I think that's a good one to have set up. And then the other one is for villager double click. And I like this because basically what's going to give you is the ability to select a villager, and when you double click, it'll select all villagers performing the same action or that are idle in the area. So now I have an idle villager, it's going to select my idle as well. So if I want to move my woodcutters, double click on the woodcutters and it'll select all woodcutters and all idle, similarly for meat. So those are the settings in the game tab that I recommend setting up. So this one, you see I have villagers, select villagers performing same action and idle. I think that's the best one to have set up inside of here. For the UI, there's nothing really in here either. The only one is the HUD scale. I like this down, but I do kind of wish that they would separate out the minimap from the rest of the HUD, because I would actually like my minimap to be this big. Particularly in team games, I think it's super helpful, but this is just obnoxious how big this menu is down here. So I keep this all the way down to the very bottom. I wish I could get it so that I could just make the minimap larger, but we don't have that option today, at least as far as I know. If anyone knows otherwise, please let me know. But for the most part, I just keep this all the way down for that reason. And the other one that I think is worth calling out is show hit points. So we can either always show hit points, we can never show hit points, or we can have custom, which I think makes sense, in which case you can show hit points while holding Alt. I turned that off. Or you can show hit points on mouse rollover. I also have that off. Basically for me, hit points are only going to show if I select the individual units that I want to see the hit points for. And that's typically how I like to have that set up. All right, that's the nice and easy stuff. Let's get into the hotkeys, moving at a decent pace. So, different things to call out inside of here. Selecting groups hotkeys. I think everyone probably knows how this one works. We can select a group of things and put them into a hotkey group. So now I have hotkey number 2 to these villagers, and I could have hotkey number 1 to these dwarfs, and then I can easily jump between the two. The only thing that's worth calling out here is if you want to remove an individual unit from a hotkey. Let's say for whatever reason I had my Berserk and my villager in hotkey 3, but I wanted to remove the villager. Clicking U will remove that villager from the hotkey by default. So you can change that to whatever you want, but basically it's ungroup, and that's how I think about it, is U for ungroup, and I think that one is worth calling out. Command hotkeys. Very important one is attack move. By clicking A, you can move your units, and they will attack the first enemy unit that they find. Very beneficial for fighting and for macro to not have units just running when they could be doing damage. So definitely want to get used to using attack move. The only really downside to this one is if there's a building that you don't really care about killing nearby and you attack move your units to go somewhere else on the map, they'll just attack that building, so just watch out for that. And then some of these stances I do find really helpful. Stand ground in particular. For me, I use this for my trolls typically because I don't want them chasing outside of the base. And if you set them to stand ground, they won't move unless you tell them to, but they will attack what's in range. So typically for range units, that's what you are going to want to have set up. And the other ones to call out inside of here is to seek shelter. I still have it as the default for Alt-C. You can select a group of units, select seek shelter, and they'll look for shelter to protect themselves. And then you also have eject garrison units with Alt-X by default. And the one that I changed is just garrison itself. I changed to G just because it makes sense to me. So if I click G and then click on a town center, my villager will run in the town center. So go ahead and mess with that and see which one you want to have set up for that garrison, seek shelter, and eject hotkeys, because very important ones there. On the gameplay hotkeys, the only one that I really think is important in team games is flare minimap, and I just have that to my mouse button so that I can flare wherever I want with my mouse button rather than having to go down and click the flare button and then deciding where to put it out there. So probably worth setting up if you are playing a lot of team games. If you're only playing one-on-ones, you obviously don't need to set that one up. Other hotkeys to call out are combined ability and training hotkey. Depends on the buildings that you want to make, but I would not recommend changing these, because if you're going to play multiple civs, you could cause some issues, and for the most part, these are quite good as far as aligning them to your typical key setup. So each building, QWE, and then we'll have the second row potentially for ASD. I think they just make sense right with what you get at the default part of the game, so I would not recommend changing those. The area that I expect most people may want to change their hotkeys is find and select unit hotkeys. There's a lot in here to talk about. Find idle villager I have set to the spacebar, because the second I see that idle villager flag pop up, I want to be able to get to it right away and get him working somewhere. So I have it set to spacebar, very easy button to hit. And then I also have an Alt period hotkey set up for finding all idle villagers, and then a period hotkey set up for finding idle villager group, so that if your villagers have finished a gold mine and you click the period button, you'll get all of the villagers that are next to that gold mine, or what used to be a gold mine. So definitely consider what you want to have set up for these. It's really key ones just to make sure that you're constantly gathering resources. Definitely recommend setting those up. The other ones in here is a lot of select alls. So we have select all, wanted to search, select all land, and select all land / Naval Military. Really helpful hotkey late into the game. The only caveat with this one that I would call out is that there are times where you have military specifically in an area for a reason that you may not want to move. And selecting all land versus selecting idle military are two very different hotkeys. We actually casted a game pretty recently where we saw, it wasn't Matrius, he was playing Salimo, and he pretty clearly used the select all military hotkey, and he had a couple of units building a TC, and that TC stayed unbuilt for about 5 minutes during that game. So one of those risks to using this hotkey, because you may have units out there doing something that you want, and if you select all military, you may set them to do something else. Your other option is to find idle land military, and I do recommend that one more. And I have that selected to a mouse button because I use it very often. So this is going to find individual idle land military. Since I play the Norse, I use this all the time for scouting, for building, etc. If I have a unit that's idle, typically I don't want them to be idle, even as the Norse, even as military. If I'm not fighting, I probably want them building a building or scouting or gathering relics, etc. There's, especially in the first 10 minutes of the game, there's really no reason to have much idle military as the Norse, so I use that a ton. You also have the ability to select all idle land military. I do use that a decent amount as well. So go ahead and set that up how you would like it to be set up. The other ones in here for finding units, very helpful inside of fighting, microing your team, is you have the ability to select all specific types of units. So we can select all archer ships, or all siege ships, or the most important ones, all infantry, all cavalry, or all range units. I have this set to control F1, F2, and F3 because I also have hotkeys set up to find all of my barracks, great halls for me specifically, but you get the idea. You can have these hotkeys set up to find the production buildings, and then use control in the same hotkey to find the units that came out of those production buildings. Select Scout is another one that I recommend setting up. Some people may not want to use this. Where's Select Scout? My filter doesn't seem to be working. Oh, it's Find Scout, that's why. So Find Scout, I have set to comma. To be honest, I don't use this that much unless I'm playing around with Greeks or Set or something like that, because I'm using Find Idle Military to look for my scout, or I'm just hotkeying my scout to one of my control groups and using it that way. And then we also have Find Pharoh, very important for Egyptian players, so make sure to set that one up as well. And then the last section in here, I actually did keep this pretty quick, fantastic. So the last section in here that I will call out is Find Building Hotkey Shared, and this is where I have set up for myself F1 to find my barracks, F3 to find stables and siege works, F4 to select my fortresses, F2 to select archery ranges or monuments. You may want to mess with these because it does find different things depending on the civ you're playing. For example, since I play Norse, even though this hotkey description says find all stables or siege works, this actually finds the Great Hall for Norse because that's where you build your raiding cavalry out of, and that's just what it's set to there. Whereas actually F2 has no use for the Norse because it does not have a archery range to be selected. So I don't use this if I'm playing Norse. It's only if I'm playing one of the other pantheons that I actually use this hotkey. And I guess the very last one, hopefully everyone has this one set up to something they know, but find town center. And I have it to H, that is the default. H for home basically is how I think about it, particularly if you're not using Autoqueue for your villagers, gatherers, etc. You definitely want to have this set up so you can click HQ, HW for dwarfs to quickly pump out units, but definitely want to set that one up. And that's about it to call out for hotkeys. I actually did keep it quick. For some reason, I thought I'd be spending 40 minutes recording this video, but kept it to under 15. So that's the list of hotkeys. I am going to post in the description of this video my notes from when I looked through all the hotkeys so that you can kind of look through the names of the different hotkeys that you may want to set up, and you can just search them in here to set them up. But definitely an important thing just to take 10 to 15 minutes to set your hotkeys for what you want them to be. Some of the ones that I set up make a huge difference in my games, and they can definitely make a huge difference in yours. So hopefully this video is helpful for everyone. Thanks for watching, and we will see you later.